Okay, so we talked about your principles, we talked about how you're thinking about where you want the kids to get to, and also how you're bearing in mind what's coming next after this. So let's dive into the kind of individual elements of this lesson. How does your lesson start, Craig? Do you call it a do now? Do you call it a starter? And what does it look like?
I call it a do now, but I don't think it would matter much either way. Entry ticket, do now, starter, all those things. So I'm going to, John Mason says any lesson plan should be visualized. I'm going to talk not just about the components of it, but also it can't be separated from what I'm doing at that time as well. So a bit about delivery, a bit about the planning. The purpose of the do now, the why behind it, that I wouldn't tell kids is I want them to feel successful straight away. I want to pile praise on them straight away. The context, almost all the schools that I've worked in have been high PP, high deprivation, those environments where you're going to get students that don't necessarily value maths, education, all those things, and some you need to coax more into working hard than others. So I'm going to design every first bit of maths that students see so they can be successful, they can get some, I can pile praise on them, but also it allows me to separate between those who can't do the work and those who won't be doing the work, those who are opting out. So the first question that they enter into today is blank times 5 equals 50. If a kid hasn't got themselves set up and written 10 for that, I know that they're choosing not to work. And that's a different approach to them being stuck later on. So that first question, or first few questions, I need to use from a behaviour management point of view to delineate between effort over attainment. So in this case, this do now isn't that much of a retrieval starter. It is things they would have seen before, but it's all linked to the content of this lesson. So some of the questions are, what times 5 is 50? 2 times what is 12? And it goes down to what times by y is 6y? Or 5 times by what is 10y? Now this was year 11, so they'd seen this before, but they'd done poorly on it. So I knew it wasn't going to be a teaching from scratch situation, but I knew also that there were gaps in the knowledge related to this. So I was trying to find out where those gaps were. So that's one half of the questions, things like that, like fill in the blank to get this answer. And on the right hand side were 3 area questions. First one, it was 2 by 13. What's the area of this rectangle? Then it was 2 by 10, and then with the 3 as a separate section afterwards. What's the area of that shape? And then it was 2 by x with a 3 at the end as well. Just to start planting those seeds for expanding, multiplying, the grid method, area, and linking all those things together. And the idea that if you add areas together, you get the overall area. So that they were the questions on the do now. As students were coming in, catching them doing well, praising them, spotlighting the good behaviours, getting all that to happen. After about 4 minutes or so of them working, they all had mini whiteboards out. They all had pens out on their desk already. I paused the class and said, right, let's stop there. First, I wanted to make sure that your pens work. So,
they've been writing in their books, have they, at this stage?
Sorry, yes, yeah.
Copying the question down? Or I'm into the nitty-gritty.
Oh God, no. Yes, great question. No, what a waste of time.
Right, okay. So just the questions questions are projected on the board. All the questions are there together on a slide, and you just want the kids to write working out and answers down just in their books.
Yes, yeah. Now I need to collect this information. Now I hadn't been circulating that much because I want to be. I have 60 kids in the room. I'm at the front holding that line. I don't trust them yet.
Yeah.
This is hope for the best, plan for the worst. But I want to know how they've done. I don't know how one kid's done. I want to know how a lot of them have done. So I tricked them into telling me all their name. We didn't have a seating plan. So right, grab a pen, grab a mini whiteboard. I want to make sure that your pen works, and I want to know who you are. So make a little box in the top right hand corner of your board and write your name.
Nice.
That's going to stay there for the whole lesson. Right, do that and then show me. And then a bit of just knowing their names I think also helps with behaviour management. I don't have to refer to them as him, her, it. Throughout it, you. I can I'm telling them it's so I can be polite, but it's also the power of a name when it comes to behaviour, so that I know who I can, shame later on. And then I would pick a couple of questions, so not all of them, but I might say, right, okay, on D here, what answer did you write down? Could you put it on your mini whiteboard and show me? And just start getting an indication of where they're at in terms of their understanding. And it also adds that accountability if you haven't completed the do now. I'm going to be checking your answers.
Right, questions are coming here thick and fast. Let me just get them all down. Right, so you're picking... So firstly, I do something very, very similar in terms of answers in book, but then, to use your phrase, artifacts, get that data on the whiteboard so we can check for effort, check for understanding. I think that's super smart to do. The other thing I think is super smart is to start with an easy question. You have to, right? Like I saw one the other day, right? You will not believe this. So I saw it the other day, and it was a year 11 lesson. And the do now, it was question 1 was expand a triple bracket, right? The kids were like, what the hell's going on here? Like, but here's a twist. Teacher said after 5-10 minutes, now I know you've not been taught how to expand triple brackets. I just wanted to see if you could do. And I was like, what? So yeah, the difference it makes, rejigging the order, but also really reducing the content demands of that first question. As you say, because then you've got evidence that it's far more likely to be a lack of effort than it is a lack of understanding and so on. And it gets the confidence and momentum going. I'm big into that. I'll tell you what I'm intrigued by though. So how are you, so 2 questions really. How are you choosing which questions you get them to show on their whiteboards out of the selection? And what are you doing to check for understanding with the other ones?
So I want to check, do they know that 6 times y is how we write 6y? That's really, really important. So I'm checking on that one. And I want to know at this stage how good they are with coefficients. So is it that 5 times 2y makes 10y? It was only really those 2 that I needed, because I knew they couldn't do this content. I was trying to find where the barrier was. I don't think there's many gaps or places where you can go with expanding single brackets that you could trip up on. It would be negative numbers, it would be using coefficients, and then it would be powers as well. So there was also a question which was, what times 2y is 10y squared? It so happened that in this lesson, the 5 times blank is 10y was enough to trip enough of them off that I didn't even bother going down to the next one.
Right,
anyway.
Okay.
So it was deciding, what do I want to know in advance? I want to know, do they know this 6y and 6 times y mean the same thing? And can they do 5 times 2y essentially?
And what do you do with the rest? Just projecting the answers up for the other questions.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, or naming a few people. If someone that I think already is a bit disengaged or needs a bit of a prompt, trying to engage them and pass some praise on them as well.
And is the argument why you're not checking for understanding using mini whiteboards for all of them? Is it just a time, like a speed argument, or is there another case for it?
Yeah, I think it's weighing up the power of going to an individual student with their name, with a teacher in front of them that they haven't seen before, who knows who I am and can address me one-on-one. I think there was something about behaviour management that I was putting as an important thing to do here as well.
To play devil's advocate, you could still do that, right? With everybody showing a response, and you still kind of warm call and get them to talk through it.
All right, well, let's say it's for time.
All right, I'm not purposely being awkward. I'm just intrigued. I love these kind of micro decisions. I'm really interested.
There's maybe an element of I don't want to say pace, it's not the right word, but if they do this, there were 5, 6, 7. There were 7 questions there. If we did that 7 times, and if I knew they all got them right as well, they might think this. I don't know. Maybe this guy's underestimating how good I am at maths. Why am I need to tell him that 10 times 5 is 50?
Right. Okay.
Why doesn't? I don't know.
Okay. No,
you could argue probably either way.
Just a couple more. Again, I think we could do an hour on the do now here, which is a real issue here. But I've just got a few more questions, if that's okay, Craig. 'Cause I'm fascinated about this. I'm kind of preempt the guest to this one. if you get the data back from the kids from the whiteboards and they can't do it, will you just talk us through what either you did in that scenario, what you would do in that scenario? How are you responding to that, please?
Yeah. At the moment, I'm not reteaching it formally because I know what's coming up. I'm logging that information as, okay, I need to pause when I go through this later. If it is a quick fix and there's only 2 kids in the room that didn't know that 6 times y is how I write 6y, great, let's fix that there and then. If it's half of them, I'm not going to address it at this stage. I want to say thank you and we've got different answers here. It's really helpful for me. Thank you so much. That lets me know where to pitch the thing I'm going to explain later, but it would then change my explanation of what I hover on, what I spend more time doing.
And how would that differ if it was a retrieval question in the do now that wasn't related to the rest of the lesson, or would you just not go there with one of those anyway? Because I'm thinking that's a different scenario, right? Because then you've a decision to make. You could address it there and then, or you could just leave it. But I'm just interested how you play that.
That is going to depend on the topic and how quickly it is.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things that I see is that where teachers do these retrieval questions and the kids get it wrong, they then go back to the kids and ask them 3 more, 4 more questions to try and eke the answer out of them. So they've shown you they can't do it. Tell them how to do it.
Yeah.
So I would, and then I would maybe go, right, this is how we do this. Let's write this model down in our books. Tomorrow, we're going to have a very, very similar question. You can look back to your example to try and get it right. I want 100% tomorrow. And then maybe a week later, it comes up again without that prompt to look back or something like that.
Yeah, it's good. This just exactly what you're saying. And I realise I've been very rude there and cut you off, but I'm going to forget this, Craig. I've got to get this out. All right, so I really apologise. Yeah, what you're describing there, I kind of call this like the 4 elements of responsive teaching, and I think what a lot of teachers do is just the first 2 of these, and that is, and you see it in the do now, but you see this all over the show. They check for understanding, and best case scenario, you get all the kids' responses. They see that kids don't get it generally, maybe half do, half don't, or whatever. So that's kind of phase 1, check the understanding. Check 2 is that they then step in with a model or an explanation, and that's all well and good. But if it ends there, you're a bit screwed, and I think you need 2 extra things. So 1, you need a quick follow-up check for understanding there and then, because if you don't do that, you are really gambling that what you've just said made any sense whatsoever to the kids, because, 30 seconds ago, they didn't have a clue. So how do you know that what you've said in the moment makes sense? So you need a quick recheck, make up a question, mini whiteboards, whatever, but then you need to do exactly what you've said then. You've got to schedule in a follow-up, whether it's next lesson's do now, next week's low-stakes quiz or whatever. And that's the awkward bit from an admin side. But if you don't do that, again, you're banking on the fact that just because they could get it there in the moment after you've just told them how to do it, that's all of a sudden enough to make it stick. So those 4 elements, check for understanding, model, recheck, schedule in a retrieval opportunity, they feel like they're kind of 4 cornerstones for dealing whenever there's a lack of understanding. Don't know if that makes sense at all. And again, apologies for cutting you off.
No, that makes perfect sense.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a couple more questions on you do now, if that's all right? If that's all right.
Yeah, please.
I haven't exhausted him yet. So next is, I'm interested in structure, because you talked a lot about kind of routines. So a lot of people would have the same structure for a do now. So a lot of people like the last lesson, last week, last term, last year, or equivalents, or Corbett Maths 5 a day, or Maths Box, or whatever, so that the kids know how to at least, not answer the questions, but how they're expected to set their work out, how long it takes roughly, blah, blah, blah. Do you go in for that? Do you have a set structure for you do now, or does it change?
Yeah, I would go in for that. Numeracy Ninjas, Corbett 5 a day, that last week, last month. Yeah, 100%. It depends what your aim of it is as to what resource you might use, but that area of predictability, that routineness, as long as the purpose behind it is shared, 100%. What
was your structure for the lesson you described? Did it not matter as such because it was kind of a bit of a one-off lesson?
Yeah. I'd say with last time I had a routine class. It was 5 a day, and it was Numeracy Ninjas with another group. They were my go-to.
Got it. Got it. Right. Promise last question on this do now, unless you say something dead interesting here, and then it could open up. So it would be boring with this response, ideally. So I've been doing a lot of CPD on do nows. In fact, I was chatting to, I was in a sixth form college yesterday, and I talked for over an hour on the do now, because it's, I just think if you get it right, it then rolls into the rest of the lesson. If you set the tone right, the kids are engaged. But the flip side's also true. If it's a bit of a shaky do now, you're playing catch up, trying to get the kids back on board. So I think it's worth spending a bit of extra time on. So this is a good test for me, this, because I reckon there are 7 potential purposes of a do now that I see, and I've not written these down, so I'm going to see if I can retrieve these. So I'll go through what I think the 7 are. And then I just would like you, if possible, just to comment either which you think is the most important, or which you try and do, or if any strike you as absolutely pathetic, or whatever. I'm just interested. So one is just to settle the kids down. You know, kids are arriving at different times. Some are noisy, blah, blah, blah. So just to settle them down so they're ready to learn. Another is potentially to engage them. So something to make them think, oh, this is interesting, blah, blah, blah. Another is, which is related to this, is to kind of prime them. So to give them something that gets them thinking of the right kind of area of maths that you're then going to go on and teach the new idea to. Kind of a more formal version of that is a prerequisite knowledge check. So this is similar to what you're describing here. What's the kind of core things that if they don't know them, you're going to really struggle to build this new idea upon. And next is a retrieval starter. So it will not be related to what's going on in the rest of the lesson, but it's just to make sure kids don't forget things. I reckon I'm up to 5 now, fingers crossed. It could be a low point if I'm not. 2 more. Next is to kind of respond. I think this is an interesting one. So perhaps kids have done a test last lesson, and the start of this lesson is responding to that. I see you all struggled on question 7. Have a look at this worked example. Now try this follow-up. Or I see you struggled on this question in your homework. Let's go through it, blah, blah, blah. So a response to something. And then the final one, and I got this from Adam Boxer, and I think this is really good. I've experimented with this. And that is to encourage kids to do homework. And this worked really well. So this is where you say to kids, the previous lesson, okay, your homework tonight is whatever, Sparks, Maths Watch, My Maths, whatever it may be. And the start of next lesson, I'm going to pick 2 questions off that homework. So literally 2 questions that you will have seen and that you can get the answer to and you can watch a video on. And I'm going to ask you literally 2 questions on that homework at the start of next lesson. And if you don't get them right, you're in a bit of trouble, because that is a clear indication to me that you haven't done your homework, blah, blah, blah. So there will be kind of 7 purposes. So my question to you is kind of 2-part question, Craig, if that's okay. The first is, what do you think are the most important purposes of those? And, you know, how does that fit into your philosophy of the do now? And the follow-up question, which I think is an awkward one, is if, let's say, for example, your do now is a prerequisite do now, a prerequisite check, where do the other purposes fit? Where do you kind of sort the other stuff out? So where does the retrieval happen? Or where do you respond to, you know, something that may have happened previous lesson? So what are your purposes, and where do the other purposes fit into your lesson? I don't know if that makes any sense at all. I'll shut up now.
That makes, yeah, all perfect sense. So I think my top 3 is one, well, you said settle and engage. Yeah. So I was going to say get behaviour right, yeah, which I guess is you've then broken down further. For me, with a regular class, I would use it as a chance for retrieval, because it seems like the perfect moment to do that. Yeah, so the behaviour and the retrieval for me, in terms of the priming and the engaging, I spoke about the different phases of the lesson I've got, and one's exposition. Yeah. I would put that in there, yeah. And that's partly because the start to a lesson can be so disruptive in terms of people coming in 5 minutes late, 2 minutes late. I'm not going to put anything really, 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 really important in it. Yeah. Just in case. That respond part, I don't know about that, because I want students to come in and feel successful. If the first thing they're encountering is something that they didn't do well with,
interesting, yeah,
and if it requires a bit of reteach first of all, well, they all need to be in the room for that to happen. Yeah. And again, if they've come from 5 different parts around the school, yeah. I don't know. I did see a teacher once use the Sparks have an insights page, which lets you know all the things your class can't do. Right. And that was their do now. Right.
Right.
No, but they can't do it. Anyway, yeah, we're going to go through it. When? After they felt awful for 5 minutes about themselves. Anyway, I can, So that behaviour, which I put for settle and engage not necessarily into the topic, but just engage into a mathematical way of working, and retrieval. Yeah, I think they're my biggest.
So if you had a regular class and you were doing a retrieval do now, would the prerequisite knowledge check just follow the retrieval do now? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I would know more about them, and but we'd do some checks, and it might be that right after this we go, right, mini whiteboards, what are the things we need to know today? Can you still do this? Can you do this? Oh, remember it's that. Whatever. I would do that after. Yeah, because those prerequisite checks you need everyone to be involved with. And again, sometimes you see the do now ending when one kid's been in the room for 10 minutes and one kid's been in the room for 2 minutes. And if it's a task that is pivotal to the rest of the lesson, you need to know that you've got them all and that they're all going to be engaging fully with it. And that's going to come down to your classroom structures and your school structures as well. And when you know you've got them all of them at the same time, if you do a lineup or something and they all come in at the same moment, you've got some more flexibility there with what you can do, I think.
I'll tell you what, you've caused me trouble here, Craig. You've said something interesting again, which has sparked one more question on this do now, so I do apologise. That kind of kids coming in at different times, it's a big problem in lots of schools. And as I say, I was in the sixth form college yesterday, and this was a huge problem. The kids were wandering in any old time. And what I suggest in those scenarios, and I'd be really interested in your take on this, is instead of doing what you've described, where you've got all the questions on the board and the kids have 4 minutes, 5 minutes or whatever to do it, and then you start kind of going through them however you choose to, instead just to have one question on the board at a time that everyone who's in that room focuses on for 20 seconds, answers on mini whiteboard, 3, 2, 1, show me, okay, sort it out, right, next question, here it is. And what's quite nice about that is, sure, if a kid arrives late, they miss the first 2 or 3 questions or whatever, but then they're with the rest of the class for the point in the do now where it is, as opposed to when the kid comes in late, what's going on, they're playing catch up, they only get through questions 1 or 2, and maybe that's not the one you choose to go through, so you get no information, data from them and so on. What's your take on that kind of the one at a time do now?
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess it depends what you're trying to achieve. If they've not engaged in the first few questions for not being in the room, so are you leaving it so the questions as they go through are more and more important?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, yeah, ordering matters.
In which case, would you front load them so that they are the first question that students engage with on if you put it 10 up, if you just made that question number 1 anyway, so that was the important one. I think if they've missed a question, they're going to miss a question either way if they come in late.
Yeah.
So I guess the idea of if it is a problem, I guess I wouldn't put anything that's vital in that section anyway.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's just, again, just trying to find ways to get the most out of that start of the lesson. And if a kid misses the first 5 minutes, what's the best way for them to spend that time? Is it just trying to do questions 1 or 2, but then you get no information from kind of 3, 4 or 5 or whatever, or is it to make them feel part of the class for that questions 3, 4 and 5, but then you lose the information for 1 and 2? It's just worth, and I'll say in some scenarios it works really well because the kids come in and they're straight into it then. They're not playing catch up, they're straight with wherever the rest of the class is. It's just worth experimenting with, I think.